I was zip-tying the last corner of the American flag bunting to the railing on my dock when I heard the unmistakable click of heels on concrete. My gut told me exactly who it was before I even turned around. "Victor," came that nasal voice, sharp and smug. "What do you think you're doing?" I sighed, still crouched down. "Decorating. It's Independence Day weekend, Denise." Denise Langley, head of the HOA board and self-declared queen of Lakeside Ridge, stood at the edge of my backyard like she owned the property lines. Her bob haircut bounced as she craned her neck toward the lake, eyes fixed on my dock like it had personally offended her. "You can't just put up unauthorized structures," she snapped, arms crossed. "That dock isn't compliant with neighborhood aesthetic standards." "It's been here for 7 years," I said, standing. "And it's not a structure, it's a dock on my property with flags for the 4th of July. Denise squinted at the bunting like it was radioactive. "Those flags are excessive. They're not in the HOA-approved decor guide." "It's a national holiday, Denise," I said. "You know, the one where we celebrate freedom." She ignored that. "I'll be filing a violation. You'll need to take it all down before sunset." I laughed, which only made her jaw tighten. "It's staying up. My son's coming back from deployment tomorrow, Marine Corps. I'm going big this year." Her lips curled like I'd just spit on her porch. "That's irrelevant. The HOA rules are clear. No excessive displays." "That dock is a visual disruption to the lakeside view." She turned and stomped off before I could respond. I muttered, "Happy 4th, Denise," to her retreating back. I thought that would be the end of it. I should have known better. The next morning, I was halfway through cleaning the grill when I noticed 2 squad cars creeping down my street. They stopped, right in front of my house. "Mr. Fortner," one of the officers asked as he approached. "We got a call about an unauthorized structure over the water." "Something about a code violation." "You've got to be kidding me," I said. "It's a dock and an American flag for tomorrow." The cop looked uncomfortable. "We have to respond to all calls." "Of course." I glanced down the street. And there she was, Denise, standing 3 doors down in a pastel tracksuit, arms folded, watching it all like she was directing a movie. "She called you, didn't she?" I asked. The officer didn't answer, but he didn't have to. "Come on," I said, gesturing toward the backyard. "I'll show you the terrifying threat to society." They followed me behind the house and onto the dock. The flags fluttered lightly in the breeze, red, white, blue, nothing offensive, nothing political, just patriotism. One of the officers nodded. "Looks like a standard holiday setup to me." "Exactly," I said, "and it's on my property." The second officer checked something on his pad. "According to county records, your dock is fully permitted. Nothing illegal here." I looked at Denise, who was still watching from a distance. I gave her a little wave. She turned and stormed back to her house. But I had a feeling she wasn't done, and neither was I. I spent the rest of that afternoon finishing the decorations. Not one piece came down. I added solar lanterns along the dock rail, lined the walkway with small LED lights, and even rigged a Bluetooth speaker under the bench to play salsa marches when my son arrived. It wasn't just a welcome home. It was a declaration. I wasn't folding to a woman who thought authority meant control. The next morning, just past sunrise, I opened my front door to find a folded paper taped to the glass. Official HOA letterhead. I peeled it off and read it standing barefoot on the porch. Emergency compliance notice: unauthorized modifications to waterfront zone. Immediate removal required. Fine, $1,000 per day of non-compliance. Enforcement begins July 4th. I didn't laugh this time. I went inside, tossed the paper onto the kitchen table, and unlocked the filing cabinet under the counter. I pulled out a manila folder labeled Property Docks Lakeside Ridge. Inside were blueprints, permits, and a printout of the original HOA charter from when I bought the place. I scanned through it, searching for anything that could even remotely justify her claim. Nothing. Then I opened my laptop and logged into the county records database. My dock was grandfathered in, fully permitted, and marked as permanent structure by the local zoning office. Not only that, but the county's floodplain map showed the dock outside the HOA's easement boundaries, so I printed it. All of it, and mailed a certified packet to the HOA office with a cover letter that read, in bold, "Cease and desist retaliatory enforcement action." I knew she'd read it. I copied the board members too. By noon, I was back on the dock, tightening a loose bracket under the bench when my neighbor from across the lake, Dylan, paddled over in his kayak. He worked night shifts as a paramedic and usually kept to himself. Today, he looked fired up. "You get that fine too?" he asked, gliding up to the side of the dock. "You got one?" I asked, standing. "Yup," said my string lights were disruptive to natural light flow. "What does that even mean?" I shook my head. "It means she's on a warpath." "Yeah, well, she picked the wrong weekend." "My sister's flying in from overseas tonight. I'm not taking down a single bulb, you and me both." He nodded, then pulled a sealed envelope from his dry bag. "I'm dropping this at the county clerk's office, filing a formal complaint. Retaliatory enforcement is a violation of civil code. You mind if I add mine to the stack? Bring it over by 2. I'll wait." I did exactly that. By dusk, word had spread. Denise had hit 8 more houses with fines, every single one decorated for the holiday. An older couple down the block, the Mortys, had been fined for flying 2 flags, 1 American, 1 POW/MIA. Their violation notice said non-standard dual flag configuration. By morning, the neighborhood was buzzing, not with fireworks but fury. The 4th arrived, and the weather was perfect, sky clear, breeze steady, lake like glass. My son's flight landed at 10. By noon, he was standing on the dock in full uniform, a duffel bag at his feet, and a smile I hadn't seen in 2 years. As he hugged me, I heard the faint shuffle of feet behind us. We turned. Denise stood at the edge of the yard, clipboard in hand, 2 men in polo shirts behind her. One held a measuring tape, the other had a camera. She didn't even acknowledge my son, just pointed at the dock. "This is your final notice. You are required to remove all non-compliant elements. These men are here to begin documentation for lien proceedings." I stepped forward, but my son beat me to it. "You're threatening my dad with a lien. On the 4th of July. Are you serious?" Denise blinked. "Excuse me, but this is private HOA business. Military presence does not exempt anyone from compliance." He took a slow step toward her. "I just spent 14 months in a combat zone, and I come home to this." "You're threatening fines over flags on private property." The man with the camera lowered it. "I'm well within my rights," Denise said, her tone wavering for the first time. "The board authorized this action unanimously." That's when Dylan walked up, holding a county zoning map. "No, you didn't," he said. "I spoke to 2 board members this morning. They had no idea you were issuing these fines. You acted alone." Denise's face went pale. "That's not true." "I recorded the calls," he said. "Want to hear them?" she faltered. "You don't have authorization to. That's not how consent laws work in this state," Dylan cut in. "And the county clerk's office has already received multiple complaints. They've opened an investigation." I stepped beside him. "And the sheriff's office is reviewing the call logs from the police dispatch 2 days ago. False reports to law enforcement are a Class B misdemeanor. You said my dock was an unpermitted hazard. That's a lie." The man with the measuring tape stepped back, slowly folding it. Denise tried to compose herself. "This isn't over." "No," I said. "It's just starting. We're calling a special meeting. Emergency session. According to Article 4, subsection C, if 1/3 of homeowners request it, the board must convene within 72 hours. "I'll block it." "You can't," Dylan said. "We already have signatures." 47 homes. She turned and walked off without another word, her clipboard swinging like a loose anchor at her side. That night, the lake lit up. Every dock, every porch, every rooftop glowed with colored lights, flags, and music. Boats drifted under strings of lanterns. Neighbors grilled together, shared drinks. Kids played tag between yards. The air smelled of barbecue and freedom, and Denise, her house was dark. Curtains drawn, no music, no guests. But that wasn't the end of it. 3 days later, we held the emergency meeting in the community center. I'd never seen it so full, standing room only. People fanned themselves with printed copies of the HOA charter. Others wore pins shaped like tiny flags. We didn't shout. We didn't argue. We brought evidence. Dylan presented his recorded calls with board members. The Mortys handed out photos of their flag setup, both flags flown per U.S. flag code. I showed the certified documents proving the HOA had no jurisdiction over my dock. Then came the clincher. A local journalist had caught wind of the story. She stood up from the back row and introduced herself, then played a voicemail she'd received from Denise, left by accident after a call. In the message, Denise complained about patriotic grandstanding and said clearly, "If I let one of them put up flags, they'll all think they can do whatever they want." The room went silent, then someone clapped, then another. Within seconds, the entire place erupted. A motion was made to suspend Denise from the board pending investigation. It passed unanimously. Afterward, as people filed out, Dylan clapped me on the shoulder. "Think she'll take the hint?" "I think she just got the message," I said. As we walked out into the evening air, the last rays of sunlight lit up the lake. Flags still fluttered from every dock. No fines. No fear. Just freedom. By the following Monday, the fallout was already beginning to spread beyond our neighborhood. A county council liaison named Erica Tan showed up at my door just after noon, flashing a badge that identified her as part of the Office of Civic Oversight. She wasn't here for pleasantries. "I'm conducting interviews regarding the HOA's recent activity," she said, "particularly in relation to discriminatory enforcement practices and potential misuse of municipal services." I stepped aside and motioned her in. "You've got coffee but no cream. Hope that's all right." She nodded, pulling a small recorder from her satchel. "Black is fine." "I'd like to start with your recollection of events from July 2nd onward, specific dates, times, and any documentation you provided or received." I brought over the folder I had compiled since Denise's first attempt to threaten me off my own dock. Erica flipped through it silently, eyes scanning each page like she was assembling a jigsaw puzzle only she could see the edges of. "There's something else," I said, setting down my coffee. "You might want to talk to a guy named Robert Kimball. He's the HOA's treasurer, quiet type, keeps to himself. But he called me last night after the emergency meeting." Erica looked up. "What did he say?" "He told me Denise had been funneling HOA funds into a separate account, one that doesn't appear in the quarterly breakdown. Said she used it to hire a private compliance contractor under the table. No board approval. That got her attention." "Do you have a recording?" I shook my head. He wouldn't go on record, but he hinted that the invoices were stored on a shared drive. "If you can get a warrant, or whatever it is you folks do, I bet you'll find them." Erica stood and clicked off the recorder. "Thank you, Mr. Fortner. I'll be in touch." By the next day, a county subpoena landed at the HOA's office, and it didn't stop there. One of the residents, a retired court clerk named Judith Hemphill, had filed an ethics complaint with the State Homeowners Association Licensing Board, a little-known agency that handled internal misconduct among certified HOA leadership. That meant Denise was being investigated from two angles, one legal, one administrative. Things started to spiral fast. First, the board's vice president, a woman named Carol Wexler, resigned in writing and faxed a copy to the entire neighborhood. In the letter, she claimed Denise had pressured her into signing off on blanket violation letters post, dated to make it appear as though the board had voted on them weeks prior. Then came the forensic audit. At a hastily assembled town hall, this time held in the elementary school gym, due to sheer attendance, an outside accountant presented his findings. Over $19,000 in miscellaneous enforcement expenses had been diverted from HOA reserves to a private bank account under the name DL. Property Services, someone in the crowd shouted, "That's her initials." The room exploded. Erica Tan was present, scribbling everything into a leather-bound notebook. Denise didn't show. But just before the meeting ended, an officer from the county's white-collar crime division stepped forward and asked the crowd for silence. "My name is Detective Rafik Mahmood. I'm here to inform you that Denise Langley is now the subject of an active criminal investigation. Charges pending include misappropriation of HOA funds, falsified official documents, and abuse of authority under color of law." No one clapped. No one cheered. It was too heavy for that. Instead, I saw neighbors exchanging stunned looks, people who had lived side by side for years. suddenly realizing how close they'd come to being steamrolled by someone with a clipboard and a grudge. The next morning, I found Dylan at the edge of his yard, coiling up a garden hose. His eyes were tired. "You hear about the arrest warrant?" he asked. I nodded. "What time?" 6:30. They picked her up from her sister's house in Hillridge. She'd already packed a suitcase. We stood there for a moment, listening to the wind cut through the trees. Then he said, "You know what gets me? She could have just said no to the flags, sent a warning, but she called the cops on the 4th of July. She wanted to make an example," I said. Only she ended up being the example. That afternoon, I received a formal apology from the interim board. Carol's resignation had triggered a re-election, and a young paralegal named Marcus Levin had stepped in as acting president. He came to my house in person, shook my hand, and handed me a letter on HOA letterhead with a gold seal embossed at the bottom. "We're wiping the fines," he said. "All of them, and we're changing the enforcement policy. From now on, no violations can be issued without a full board vote and written justification." I glanced at the letter, then back at him. "You're really cleaning house," Marcus nodded. "We have to, the county's watching, and frankly, so is every HOA in the state. This case is going to set precedent." Word must have traveled fast because that weekend, a local news van parked down by the lake. A reporter named Candace from Channel 9 asked if she could film a short segment on my dock. I told her yes, but only if she included the Mortys, Dylan, and Judith. This wasn't just about me. The piece aired that Sunday evening. It showed wide shots of the lake, interviews with residents, and a closing line that said, "In Lakeside Ridge, patriotism wasn't just defended, it was vindicated." The following week, the state licensing board issued its ruling. Denise Langley was officially barred from serving on any HOA board in the state for life. The cherry on top. The county council passed a new ordinance requiring any HOA operating within its jurisdiction to submit quarterly financial reports directly to the clerk's office. No more secret accounts. No more shadow contractors. A few days later, my son helped me take down the last of the decorations. The bunting had faded slightly and the flag's edge had frayed in the summer heat, but none of it felt like a goodbye. It felt like a promise. "Think she'll do time?" he asked, coiling the ropes. "If there's justice," I said. "She will." He paused, then looked back at the lake. "You ever think about running for the board?" I laughed. "Too many skeletons in my smoker." But the truth was, I had thought about it, not because I wanted power. Because I'd seen what happened when the wrong people had it. That night, as the sun dipped below the tree line, I sat on the dock with a glass of iced tea, watching the ripples catch the last of the light. For the first time in weeks, there was no tension in the air, no clipboard-wielding tyrants. Just neighbors waving from yards, kids skipping stones, and a quiet that felt earned. No more threats. No more fines, just peace. The kind you fight for and keep. 2 weeks passed, and Lakeside Ridge slowly settled into something it hadn't known in a long time: quiet. Not the kind of silence that comes from suppression, but the kind that follows resolution. The neighborhood no longer whispered about fines or who had received what letter. Instead, people were talking about replanting flower beds, organizing a fall cookout, and repainting mailboxes on their own terms. But the story wasn't quite over. One evening, just before dusk, I got a call from Judith Hemphill, the retired court clerk who had filed the ethics complaint. Her voice was urgent but steady. "They just unsealed the indictment," she said. "It's worse than we thought." I set down the wrench I'd been using to tighten a loose gutter bracket. "Go on." Denise didn't just dip into the HOA reserve fund. She siphoned over $16,000 into a shell account listed under a defunct landscaping company. The kicker: that company was registered to her nephew, who lives 3 counties over and hasn't done a day of work in this neighborhood. I took a moment to absorb that. "Is that confirmed?" "Confirmed and documented. County investigators traced the routing numbers and matched IP addresses from the login activity. It's airtight." "What happens now?" "She's being arraigned tomorrow morning." The DA's office is pushing for fraud, wire misrepresentation, and falsifying financial disclosures. That's 3 felonies, Victor. She's going to trial. That night, I stood by the lake as the sun dipped below the tree line. The dock creaked gently beneath my boots. I watched the reflections ripple, the water calm and untroubled. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing a steel string guitar on their porch. It felt like the neighborhood was finally breathing again. The next morning, I showed up at the courthouse. I wasn't the only one. Rows of folding chairs had been set up outside the courtroom to accommodate the overflow. Dylan was already there, seated between Mr. Morty and Marcus Levin, our new acting HOA president. Carol Wexler, who had once sided with Denise, sat at the far end of the row, her arms folded and eyes forward. She didn't look defensive anymore. She looked resolved. The courtroom was sterile and windowless, buzzing with quiet tension. When Denise was led in, hands cuffed in front, hair flattened, wearing county-issue beige, no one said a word. The judge read the charges: wire fraud, embezzlement, abuse of fiduciary responsibility. Her attorney tried to argue for leniency, citing community misunderstanding and overzealous enforcement, but the judge cut him off. The defendant knowingly diverted community funds into a fraudulent entity. This was not a clerical error. This was deception by design. The bailiff handed the judge a folder. He flipped through it, nodding slowly. In light of the evidence presented by the county's Office of Civic Oversight and corroborated by forensic accounting, I am denying bail. Defendant will remain in custody until trial. Denise didn't speak. Not once. After the hearing, a local reporter approached me outside the courthouse. You were one of the first targeted by Miss Langley's actions. Do you feel like justice is being served? I glanced at the courthouse doors. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about stopping the cycle. That's what this neighborhood finally did. By the time I got home, 2 more neighbors had dropped by to thank me. One brought a pie. The other, a veteran named Leroy from 3 houses down, handed me a small plaque he'd carved in his garage. A wooden outline of the dock with a flag etched into it. Later that week, the board held their first official meeting under Marcus's leadership. It was held on the community green instead of the stuffy HOA office. Open seating, no pre-screened sign and sheets, and no speeches, just conversation. Marcus stood in the center and looked around. We've got a lot of rebuilding to do, not just structurally. Trust takes longer. He pulled out a small booklet. We're rewriting the bylaws, transparent enforcement, open budget, term limits, and a new clause. No board member can unilaterally authorize any punitive action, ever again. A few people clapped. Others nodded quietly. Then Marcus added, and we're naming the community dock after Victor Fortner's son. Lance Corporal David Fortner Dock. It's symbolic, but it matters. I looked around. The faces looking back weren't just neighbors anymore. They were people who had stood shoulder to shoulder when it counted. After the vote, Dylan approached me. Guess we're all accidental activists now. I chuckled. Let's hope we don't have to do it again. He nodded toward the dock, where someone had already tied a fresh bow of red, white, and blue ribbon to the new signpost. You know, I think this place actually feels like a community now. The following weekend, the neighborhood held a lakeside barbecue not because the HOA scheduled it, but because people wanted it. Tables were pushed together. Kids ran barefoot between backyards. The Mortys brought out a karaoke machine, and someone even lit a few leftover sparklers once the sun dipped. Judith tapped me on the shoulder while balancing a paper plate full of ribs. You know what Denise didn't count on? She asked. I raised an eyebrow. She thought fear would keep people quiet, but fear doesn't last. Facts do, so does unity. That stuck with me. A week later, I received a letter from the State Homeowners Oversight Committee. It was formal, typed on thick paper, but the last line stood out. We commend your efforts in restoring integrity to your community's governance and protecting the rights of homeowners. Your actions will be included in upcoming training for HOA board certification across the state. Sometimes, doing the right thing means planting your feet and refusing to budge. Sometimes, it means knowing when to bring receipts. And sometimes, it's just about standing up in front of your neighbors and saying, enough. Denise Langley is awaiting trial with her hearing date set for early fall. Her nephew has turned state's witness in exchange for immunity. The fake company is being dissolved. The HOA has opened its books and is holding monthly public budget reviews. As for me, I still sit on the dock most evenings. The flag waves freely, untethered from the weight of pettiness and control. It's not just a flag anymore, it's proof. Proof that even in a small lakeside neighborhood, people can stand up, push back, and change the story, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with truth, community, and a dock that flew a flag when it mattered most.